everyone, it's Arrowfire. Now recently you might have seen on Transformers the Show that I have been doing segments over the last 3 weeks talking about what we expect to see in the scale ranges going forward. Those 3 scale ranges are Legends, CHUG and Masterpiece. Now in doing so I want to talk about what we see and what we expect to see in things like transformation, articulation, presentation and the overall cost of the figures. I hope you enjoy it. Now to help me talk about this range I'm going to need some assistance, and here is Earthrise Skywarp in the Seeker mould. Now of course Skywarp is Voyager class. Now you can get into a whole different discussion about classes within the CHUG line anyway, but we're not going to go that far into it at this point. I'm just going to use him as the CHUG example. Now Earthrise and in particular the Seekers have been very, very good and have spoiled us a little bit. This is one reason why I want to talk about them first. What would we expect to see from this particular line, this particular mould, that we haven't maybe seen before, or we certainly are now expecting to see since? So what I'll start off with is the articulation. Now, by and large, there isn't too much going on with the arms, fairly standard arm movement, elbow bends, nothing too unsurprising there. But what I do like to see, and I mentioned this in my review video at the time, if any of you caught it on my channel, is ankle tilt on a non-masterpiece figure. This kind of stuff would be left for masterpiece only. You'd expect to see it on masterpiece. You wouldn't necessarily expect to see it on CHUG line. And when you're getting that, that opens up a whole range of posability options for displaying or photographing or whatever you want to do. It really does make a difference. Next I'm going to talk about how he looks, and this is going to be how he looks painted, how the plastic feels, how it's just kind of displayed to us. And by and large this figure feels absolutely fine. You don't feel like the plastic's going to break on you. It's not a 8-face situation. That's one for you, Paul. But this is still a very nicely decorated figure. Now in the Siege line of War for Cybertron they had this battle damage rusty look, and quite frankly on lighter colours, be it whites and silver plastic moulds or paint, it came across looking very dirty. I know that's what it was trying to go for, to be rugged, but I felt it took the sheen off a character. The Earthrise figures look very clean and they pop some more. You can see here for the silver elements of the chest, or even on the cockpit in orange clear plastic, it really comes across quite well presented, quite clean and quite vibrant. Not to mention his purple arms, which I think is a big selling point for the Skywarp figure in particular. But this isn't too hard to perfect, and really getting the aesthetics right is something they've been working on from back in Combiner Wars days, because this is what's going to drag you to a figure first. If it looks good in the photographs when you first see it, then you're probably going to want to know more about it, you're going to want to invest more to it. If it doesn't look good, you're not going to be interested. Next would be the transformation, and obviously for this we're going to have to get it transformed up into its jet mode. Now this is where you can kind of make or break a figure. The CHUG lines have always supposed to be very simple, very straightforward figures to transform, and it shouldn't give you any problems. You shouldn't have to rely too much on the instructions, and to be honest, once you've transformed them once or twice you shouldn't need the instructions at all. But a transformation shouldn't really have to be complex. It should be fun, it should be intuitive, it should be enjoyable. It is the main gimmick of Transformers after all. But quite often it is the journey more so than the destination, but it's also about the journey. Now finally we'll come down to price. Now the reason why you see a lot of CHUG in people's Transformers collections is because it's the most common one to find, and it's the most affordable range to have en masse anyway. The Siege and Earthrise lines have slightly increased their prices, but this is what you're getting as a result of it. There has kind of been this moniker going around, particularly with Earthrise, that these are mini masterpieces. And they are. Now, versus what you were getting maybe 2 years ago is quite a big leap. And the price has slightly increased, but you're certainly getting still what you're paying for. And this is why CHUG is still very common in most people's collections. Now depending which class you're getting within CHUG, you can range from as little as maybe £10 or £15 up to maybe £50 or £100 or £130 in the Titan classes, and again you're getting this level of detail, this level of bang for buck, and it really is hard to argue. But this is what we're expecting to see now. Are we expecting to see these prices go up for things like this? You can't say it's not unwarranted, because in particular with this Seeker mold, it's such a good design. But where I'm getting to is this. CHUG in particular has always been the steady range. It's never really been the one you'll get the mass articulation, you won't really get the die cast, you won't get specifically painted parts. You'll have to go into the masterpiece side if you want that. But what you are getting for how much you're spending, if it's around the £21, £35, you can't argue with what you're getting, because you're getting what you're paying for. But with the increase in quality that we've seen in particular in Earthrise, is it now going beyond that? Is the articulation so good that it's now devaluing Masterpiece? It's a matter of opinion. The question is now, do we expect it? We have been spoilt with Siege and Earthrise and probably Kingdom. Do we now expect to see a waist swivel with every CHUG figure? Do we now expect to see an ankle tilt? Do we now expect them to be mini masterpieces? Are they trying to stop us buying Masterpiece? Is this Hasbro's way of coming out of the Masterpiece market? Probably not. They're not going to turn away money. They're not going to turn away trade. But if they increase their lesser line to be so good, and you expect it to be this good, it's going to leave many collectors with a couple of questions. It's hard to find a summary point to this because it is so much down to perception, but there has been a noticeable change through the War for Cybertron line, and in particular the CHUG line, that has gone from being a very average player to a very main event player.
Then, as a Legends collector, or one that has a lots of Legends in your collection. So we'll start off with a nice easy one. A presentation, display, painting of a Legend scale figure. What do you expect?
Well, this was one of the things that sort of attracted me, because I used to be a big CHUG collector, mainly collected CHUG, and I had some Masterpiece as well, and I kind of got swayed over to Legends. The ones which swayed me over were these guys, which are the New Age Seekers. So I'm relatively new this year to the Legends range, and it was these guys which got me over to the dark side and made me sell all my CHUG stuff, and I traded it in for Legend stuff. So this is Thundercracker. And you can see from the back, they're fairly good representation, and it's the paintwork and the presentation which really attracted me to them. I'll talk about articulation in a bit when you get onto that, but just in terms of their presentation, this is the best of Legends. So this is the top end, best looking bots. I feel you can get a New Age do a lot of them. Iron Factory do a different, slightly different style. But even the boxes, and I had them all displayed outside of their boxes. They're now back in their boxes because I just love that classic sort of 70s, almost early 80s box art on them. And they've all got different varying types of box art. But so for me, presentation was brilliant. Presentation for a lot of CHUG stuff I loved. And it's not necessarily just that, but the paintwork, the presentation of the robots themselves, it's absolutely spot on.
I do think that's a very interesting point that you make there. I mean, it's not just the presentation of the figure that draws itself to you, is it? It's the presentation of the box. I mean, you saw the great shot on the back there was the intro to the Series 1 of the Generation 1 cartoon, an iconic image. And particularly for Thundercracker, he's front and center of that. And then at the front of the box, as you say, kind of has a bit of more of a 70s, 80s vibe to it. It's that can be just as appealing to you as the figure, because that's the first thing you'll see if you were to go and buy it from a shop, for example, or even if you find it online, you'll see that display packet and then you think, wow, this looks great, and I haven't even taken it out of the box.
Yeah, and the Legends, well, third party, I should be fair to, gives you that freedom to do that. I mean, if you look at the New Age Seekers, now this is Legendary Heroes, and it's the Coneheads, and look, just for no reason at all, they've decided to do it in this Gradius. So if you're familiar with Nintendo NES Gradius, they've done it in the box art and they've copied it over exactly and put Unicorn's head. Now you wouldn't get that with Hasbro, because it just wouldn't be infringing on copyrights, which China loves to do. But no, it's stuff like that which just their presentation is spot on, and they get that extra bit of freedom. With the New Age Seekers, you actually get bits of the space bridge. So you actually build up the whole space bridge with the Seekers, and you can have them displayed on top, going around. So
that's cool. That's good. So in terms of the figure then, have you got a figure to hand that you would kind of want to show off and sort of display for that? Oh, yeah. Look at that. Look who's crept in.
There we go. So this is Iron Factories. You've got probably 4 main Legend scale companies. You have New Age. They tend to be slightly smaller. You have Iron Factory, probably a little bit smaller than New Age, maybe a little bit bigger in some molds. Magic Square, they're the slightly bigger ones, and then you have Mech Fans Toys, and they're the biggest of the new of the Legend scale. So this is Iron Factory Jazz. He's called Rush Beats, and he's just one because he just epitomizes everything I love, which drew me over to Legends. So he's got this kind of transformation you would get in CHUG scale, so it's not overly complicated, but he's got the articulation of something which would be Masterpiece. And you've got things like ankle tilt, which he can do, which you don't really get on all the CHUG
I love a good bit of ankle tilt.
You love a bit of ankle tilt. You've got full head posing. His hands don't display; they actually fold up when you transform. Hate it when you can see Transformer's limbs in its alt mode, and he turns into a really, really good alt mode. Great detail on the paint. So it's those sort of things. That articulation. He's got full waist swivel. You can pose him like you would a Masterpiece Transformer.
I think that's another thing, isn't it? You're getting everything you would from a CHUG or certainly a Masterpiece, but in a shrunk down version. I think what's quite telling with Jazz is, as well as a character, for legal reasons, shall we say, that he's not overly represented in toy markets because of the car he is and the racing stripes and the sponsorship that goes on the actual vehicle. But in that, he looks just as you'd expect maybe a Masterpiece to look. That could almost be an IDW inspired Jazz almost, I think, just because of the sharper edges on things like the shoulders. And I love the chunky feet as well. I think that's the first thing that you draw out. I always love the blue visor of the head sculpt. I think that is a very much look at that. Yeah, that's a very iconic Jazz thing. It always looks cool.
It's not going to focus, but they also do little cool things like it's even got his speakers can pop out.
Yeah, I noticed that. Yeah,
and it's those bits which, to be fair, Masterpiece Fur Company do as well. Little attention to details, which really set it apart from bog standard stuff you normally get. You
mentioned about size there as well. How tall is he roughly?
Size, well, I'm going to cats to scale him with.
Of course.
I've got a construction that my son's, this will be for Lexus, some Lego to scale him with. So
okay.
That helps you with scale. That's Jazz on the boat.
Of course. He's looking probably about 3.5 inches, would you say, maybe 4?
Yeah, just under 4 inches, I'd say.
Yeah.
So that's cool, that they're really tiny. I quite like that as well. They don't take up loads of space.
And then, so how do you think then with the articulation on Legend scale in general? I mean, you mentioned there about Jazz and how he comes with things like ankle tilt, waist swivel, which God knows many other figures don't come with that. And in this day and age, it's almost considered sacrilegious. That how can a Masterpiece figure not have a waist swivel? But, they've happened. Not mentioning any names, fans' choice. But so what would you say then, current market with all the different companies out there, what do you expect to see from Legend scale articulation as a minimum?
I think when you look at what New Age are doing now, and Magic Square with if you've looked at their new Galvatron, which is coming out, they've just released Soundwave. That is just a mini Masterpiece as opposed to a mini Masterpiece. The articulation is absolutely spot on. The cassettes are better than the Masterpiece cassettes in their robot modes. So they've also improved their ability to produce that level of detail and that level of articulation. But there's nothing, especially when New Age and Magic Square, they're a little bit more expensive than Mech Fan toys. You should expect Masterpiece quality in terms of the articulation. You should be able to put into amazing poses. Yeah, definitely.
Good. And in terms then of transformation of a standard Legends figure, do you expect them to be easier because they're smaller, or does that make it more hard? Have you got more fiddly panels to try and tab in?
I'm a bit of a Dave Big Hands, so I've got huge hands, and I find it fine to transform. The transformations, I'd say they're similar to CHUG, and that's that's why I first started buying Masterpiece. That's what got me back into Transformers, was Masterpiece, Sunstorm, and Alternator Grimlock, both quite fiddly transformations. And it kind of put me off a bit when I saw Combiner Wars and Bruticus, and I thought, God, that's quite good actually. It's a good compromise. It's not as detailed as Masterpiece, but the transformations were good fun because I like transforming. It's a key bit. I like Transformers.
Absolutely.
I transform my toys all the time. So missing that, I really wanted it in it, and that's what Legends is. It's much better. It's not a compromise. You get the good alt mode, the good robot mode, and you get a good transformation, which doesn't take ages. There are Legends Transformers which do take ages. So Unicron.
This is one for Alexis, of course. It's definitely a legend scale. We've established this.
Yeah, so this is a good. Well, I can do it in about 30 minutes now, but there's some people reporting up to 2 hours.
Yeah, I wouldn't pull anyone over the coals for not transforming that figure. That's almost a rage quitting, flipping the table. I'm done with this.
So those ones are quite bad, but most of the transformations for pretty much all legends are nice and simple and easy.
Again, you make a very good point there. These are, as I said before, these are the main gimmick of transforming. The transformation should be fun. It shouldn't be a case of when you finish, your fingers are bleeding and they're sore and you feel like I'm never doing it again. Any transformation that makes you feel like you don't want to do it again, in my opinion, has failed in that category as a transformer. 100%. Because you're missing out. Then you'll never see it in one mode or the other, because the chore of getting it from one mode to the other is so much, and it's just like that's where you fall down on producing a figure. At least I think.
Oh, definitely. And I understand there are people who don't like the transformations. They love having that transformer, like fans' toys. I understand. I know people do transform fans' toys, but I know there's a lot of collectors who like just that amazing looking display piece in their collection, looking amazing. It's probably not going to get transformed that much, and that ticks that box for that collector. But I love transforming them, so fans' toys would be wasted on me because.
You like to fiddle around with them, yeah. No, I'm exactly the same. I have a couple of fans' toys figures, and they don't get transformed as much, but they do get transformed because I've got the aerial bots, and I think they look fantastic in both modes. But I do have to set aside a good half an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, so then just finally, then, what would you expect to see on a cost level of legend scale? Now, I know you talked about different third-party companies, and different companies will charge what they want, and also you do have varying heights. So I'll start then just picking on Jazz. What would you expect figures of that ilk to cost you in a legend scale?
Now it's quite hard because it is a bit like fans' toys that if you don't get them when they first come out with Iron Factory, Magic Square, and New Age, they go up a lot in price, especially Iron Factory. So a Jazz, when it came out, would cost you £30, and they come with loads of accessories as well. But if you were to pick it up now, you'd sort of be paying £50 to £60 for it. So they almost double in price if you don't get them on release. So that's a pain in the bum for Iron Factory. Magic Square and New Age. New Age is a little bit more expensive. So a Seeker would cost about £40 to £45. So a little bit more, well, probably about £10, £20 more than CHUG would for the same figure, even though it's smaller. So you are paying a little bit more for that premium, but it's the detail. But then you look at Mech Fans Toys, these are absolutely fabulous figures, and these cost like £15. If you look at Ultimate Commander, which is kind of Power Master Prime, Iron Factory's version, when you first got it out, it was about £50 to £60, but now it's about £160 to pick him up with the RC that it comes with.
Curse of the secondary market.
Yeah, and that's really only Iron Factory. New Age goes up a little bit more, as does Magic Square, but Iron Factory, because they don't make many of them, it really does go up in price.
All right.
Like Kapow still sell them. So you can go into Kapow and they'll have stock of 3 or 4 Iron Factory robots you can go and just buy for like £20 to £30.
I think Legends is a very interesting topic, and it's actually something I want to talk about in another video down the line. I think what you're getting, particularly with some of the ones you've just shown me now, Paul, I think they look really good. As I said to you before we just started doing the chat, I think some of the sound waves that I've seen in New Age, it turns your head as a collector. You're not spending anywhere near as much. Space obviously becomes an issue for a masterpiece collector or anyone of that type, even CHUG with the Titan classes. And you're looking at some of these, they're great value for money, great size for storage, and still great fun. And you think it can turn a lot of people into going a bit smaller and still having a very fun collection.
So for today, and my helpful assistant will be this time, Masterpiece Ultra Magnus, a figure I'm very fond of and I think would actually help us quite a lot, talking about the G1 aesthetic. But I also need another assistant for some slight differences. I'm going to be using Masterpiece Beast Wars Dinobot. There are some subtle differences between the Beast Wars range and everything that's not Beast Wars. So let's have a look, shall we? We'll start off looking at the aesthetics of Ultra Magnus in a Masterpiece figure by Takara. Now it's a bit harder because they're trying to capture a range of Ultra Magnus, Ultra Magni. So you're thinking, is this the Generation 1 cartoon? Is this the 1986 movie? Is this Marvel Comics? There's a lot of different characters and representations of Ultra Magnus out there that Takara are trying to capture and present in a figure. But what I would expect to see from a typical G1 inspired Masterpiece figure from a look aesthetic would be very similar and great homage to the original G1 cartoon. And no question here, Ultra Magnus certainly does that. There's an exceptional amount of colour and paint on this figure, as there are with most Masterpiece, and there should be for what you're paying, but we'll get to cost in a minute. The detail on things like the face sculpt, this is what you expect to see. It's called Masterpiece for a reason. You're starting to get the very finite details on things, however, we'll get to that a bit later on. This isn't a review of Ultra Magnus, of course, but when you're getting into Masterpiece territory, that's the sort of thing you've got to see. You want to really see everything, because this is Masterpiece, this is high end. So no more so when you come along to Dinobot. Now I think this is one of the best Masterpiece figures, and the reason why I'm doing Beast Wars separately is I think there are subtle differences in the Beast Wars figures. I think they're probably the best Masterpiece figures on the market. Controversial statement, I know, but again, the detail and the representation of this is it's just out of the TV series, from the screen into your hand. That's how it's meant to be, from the colouring to the detailing to some of the accessories you get. It's meant to be 100% accurate to what you see on TV. So next we'll go with articulation, and there's no real need to differentiate between Dinobot and Magnus here. The articulation should be pretty exceptional. Again, you're using high-end stuff, high-end mechanics, high-end engineering. You should really be getting hard ratchets everywhere. And depending on the figure, that's what you get. These insane level of posability for things. So you can have these poses, you can have your connection displayed as you like. And when you get things like individual moving fingers, this is what you expect to see, to the point that you can even get, on Dinobot at least, a moving mouthpiece for that extra characterization and customization. Again, this is what you should expect to see. So much so that we've seen it on so many Masterpiece scale figures, more so in third party, that when you don't see it, it's very noticeable. So next we're looking at transformation, and don't worry, I'm not going to do a transformation on camera because we'll be here for hours. But in particular with Dinobot, it's not the easiest transformation in the world, and a lot of it, to get that clean aesthetic look to him, a lot of it is hiding away in the back there, but that's the sacrifice you've had to make. Takara have done very well in keeping their transformations relatively simple. Ultra Magnus's transformation is actually very good, in that of course he's a cab and a trailer all merged into one robot. There's no kind of parts forming on here. But again, when things are missed off, you notice them more. And again, the butt flap of Ultra Magnus. Now it's a shame where you've got everything that folds away, his feet are very compact, and you've got wheels that have all tucked away, that have this bit sticking out, again it becomes very noticeable. To be fair to Takara, their transformations aren't the most horrendous ones out there. Finally, we'll talk about cost, because this is a big stigma for Masterpiece figures, official or otherwise. Now Takara have increased their prices throughout their Masterpiece ranges over the years. Beast Wars figures have certainly been a price of that. Now you are getting wonderful detail, wonderful paint, wonderful articulation, we've said all this, but the price for each Beast Wars figures seems to have gone up. And it's not just kept to Beast Wars, but their Beast Wars Megatron was very pricey, something in the region of £250, which was unheard of at the time. You have to be looking generally for Takara Masterpieces of somewhere between £100 to £200 per figure. However, when their Optimus Prime version 3.0 came out, this kind of set the benchmark at around £300 to £400. At what point do you say, that's a bit much? I know you're getting wonderful detail, I know you're getting a great transformation, I know it looks fantastic and it feels great, but at what point is it too much? I personally think for what we're getting, what we have had and what we're continuing to get, between £100 to £200, depending on the figure, depending on the size, depending on the engineering. I think 100 to 200 is fine. When you're starting to go 250, 300, 400 for the same size Masterpiece figure, okay, Ultra Magnus is a big example, and Optimus is smaller than him, of course, and starting to command a £400 price tag, that's when you're going to start to lose your audience. But do you expect it? You probably have to, because it's the way it's been going. It's on the upward trend. It doesn't make it right, and it is subjective, but you have to expect it. Now, you may have noticed from behind me, I'm a big Masterpiece collector. I love the level of detail that you get. I love how they look in both modes. But the price tag is the biggest issue for Masterpiece, not to mention the size as well. It's a very nasty trade-off because you love what you get. You don't necessarily love what you pay for it. I said this before in the other videos, that CHUG is making a real dent into Masterpiece. It's going to give collectors real questions. But that being said, this is still my favourite figure in my collection. I adore it. And so based on that, if they keep doing that, for a similar price tag, preferably a bit less, I'm going to keep buying them.